pistol at another, which is the victim, which Detective Crow, you already know we're just going to use initials for the victims, and we're not going to use any exact apartment locations. Also, criminal attempt to commit an armed robbery. Let me go back to the first one. The warrant states you did intentionally without legal justification, pointed a gun, a firearm at the victim, TK. You're also charged with a criminal attempt to commit an armed robbery. The warrant alleges that you performed an act by pointing guns at the victim and going through pockets in an attempt to take his belongings, which constituted a substantial step towards the commission of armed robbery. You're also charged with possession of a gun during the commission of assault. That warrant alleges that you did have within arm's reach or on your person a firearm during the commission of a felony, which was the criminal attempt to commit the armed robbery. And those are the three charges before the court. And with that being said, Ms. Broussard, if the state's ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, can you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name for the court.
It's Detective A. Crow. My badge number is 3338.
And where are you employed, Detective Crow?
With the DeKalb County Police Department, specifically within the Homicide and Assault Unit.
How long have you been with the Homicide and Assault Unit?
I've been with the unit about 3.5 years.
And are you post-certified and current on that certification?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And did you have the opportunity to investigate the defendant in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what were the facts and circumstances that led to your involvement?
So on May 9th of this year, around I think it was like 4:38 a.m., uniform officers responded to an apartment complex on Summit Creek Drive in reference to a discharging of a firearm call. Upon their arrival, the initial officer arriving was flagged down by a security guard. That security guard informed this officer that the shots came from building 300. When the officer made his way over to that building, he observed a black male in a white t-shirt who ultimately ended up being the victim, standing out in front of the location. When the victim saw the officer pull up, the victim ran back into the breezeway of that apartment building that the shots had come from and ran back into this specific apartment. The officer began to approach into the breezeway and up to this door, at which point in time he could hear somebody on the other side of the door. The officer wrote that he could hear the male pleading, "Don't do it. I swear to God, the police outside, the police outside." He could also hear multiple parties telling that person inside to shut the fuck up. At which point in time, the officer began to ask for additional units. While waiting on those units to get there, the door to this apartment opened up. The male in the white shirt, ultimately the victim, walked outside of the apartment, and the officer observed an arm protruding from the door. He couldn't see whose arm it was. There was no face or anything like that, but somebody had a handgun pointed to the back of the victim's head. When the officer saw that, he drew his firearm and announced himself, told him to drop the gun, at which point in time the officer stated the gun retracted back through the door closed and locked. While he was attempting to get this victim to safety, he heard a window open up and what sounded like somebody jumping out of a window and running away. As they waited, as more units got there, and they talked about it, they noticed that the bedroom window to one of the rooms at the location was open. It was a second-story apartment. The officers cited exigent circumstances, saying that they had gunshots, they heard somebody being assaulted inside, somebody got walked out with a gun to their head, and that they needed to check and ensure there were no additional victims inside of the location. So at that point, they contacted the fire department. The fire department brought out a ladder, and the officers used the ladder to gain access through that open second-story window. Officers, as they were coming up to the window, announced themselves as DeKalb police and made entry into the location, at which point in time they found 3 of the defendants inside of the location. Those 3 individuals were detained and provided their identification. And while officers were talking to the victim in the parking lot, the 4th co-defendant, who is the one who allegedly jumped out the window, actually walked through the parking lot, at which point in time he was pointed out by the victim, and that individual was detained as well. In reference to Mr. Davis here, he was located inside of the apartment when officers made entry to the location. All parties were brought up to headquarters and Mirandized. Nobody really provided a statement of any value. I don't think Mr. Davis provided a statement at all from my recollection. The victim informed detectives when he spoke with them that the victim himself had actually just recently been released from the Gwinnett County Jail earlier that weekend, and these 4 individuals were his friends. They picked him up from the jail, and he'd been hanging out with them all weekend. He got into an argument with one of the other males, who goes by the nickname JoJo, over a pillow. The argument escalated, and the two were going to go outside and fight. When the victim went to walk outside, one of the individuals in the house discharged a firearm, and he thought he was being shot at. And that is why he ran out of the house. And then when he stated when he saw the police and he ran back inside of the house, all 4 individuals in the house began to hit him. They threw him to the ground. They all began to point various firearms at him. And they began to go through his pockets, attempted to take items out. I don't believe they were able to get any items from the victim, at which point in time he was walked out of the apartment and one of the individuals pointed a gun at his head. We're still not sure which individual did that. Subsequent to all that, we conducted a search warrant at the apartment in question. We located most of, like, some of the victim's belongings, wallet, ID, those kinds of things. There was ammunition for 2 separate handguns. I believe it was a 40 cal and a 9mm ammunition, and gun parts such as magazines and those kinds of things strewn about all over the apartment. We also located ammunition for like 223 ammunition for like an AR-15 style firearm. And inside of the bedroom closet where one of the individuals was located, we located an AR-15 pistol sitting in plain view on the closet shelf, and a second AR-15 pistol was located in the attic, which the access to it is from that closet, was stuffed up inside of the insulation up there. That individual was charged with those 2 firearms as well. But based on the victim's, the officer hearing the gunshots, seeing the victim being walked out with a gun to his head, and the victim's statements stating that all 4 individuals partook in this assault, all 4 individuals went into his pockets, and all 4 individuals pointed guns at him that were inside of the apartment. We obtained the warrants against the 4 individuals inside of this apartment for the criminal attempt robbery, pointing a pistol, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony.
And was the incident location in DeKalb County?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And to the best of your ability, can you please identify the defendant by an article of clothing?
Yes, ma'am. It appears to be Mr. Davis there in the orange t-shirt with the white undershirt.
Thank you. You stated officers were discharged because of a shots fired call. Were they told which building area it was coming from?
I'm not sure the exact comments on the 911 call. I couldn't get that to pull up. But when the officer responded, the security flagged him down and told him specifically which building.
And Mr. Davis was present when law enforcement entered through the window?
Yes, ma'am. He was one of the 3 individuals detained inside.
Okay. Would the victim's statements be caught on body cam?
The officers, I believe, got a brief statement from him that should be on body camera, and then his official statement up with detectives would be audio recorded up here at the office.
And did you try to interview Mr. Davis?
I did not. I was present on the search warrant.
Okay. But to the best of your knowledge, he didn't make any statements?
No, ma'am. I believe the only person that really provided any sort of a statement was the individual who's located in the closet with the 2 rifles.
No further questions, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McKeithen, your witness.
Yes, Judge, thank you. Now, Detective Crow, and just to be clear, Judge, we're not mentioning street addresses or apartment names or?
The street address is fine. We can send you the apartment number in chat. Just not to
Okay.
have it, because we're streaming live on YouTube. We don't want anybody, to make any targets toward that location.
Correct. I'm just trying to be clear. Officer Crow, Detective Crow, this location in question in Gwinnett, according to your investigation, that is not the address where you have Mr. Davis as residing. Is that correct?
No, I don't. I think it was one of the individuals, like uncle's apartment. I don't believe any of them actually reside there.
Correct. As a matter of fact, you, based on your investigation, would show Mr. Davis as residing in Gwinnett County, correct?
Whoever wrote the report, if that's where they put his address.
But we do know that this is not his address, the incident location, correct?
Correct, from my understanding.
And you said that when units responded to the scene, that someone had pointed a gun towards the alleged victim, right?
Yes, the officer observed a handgun to the back of the victim's head.
Now, didn't you also say that he somehow or another turned around and went back into the apartment?
That was before the gun was pointed to his head.
And so after he had left the apartment after the incident with the firearm, correct?
Correct. After the argument about the pillow, and as he was walking out of the apartment, apparently to fight one of the other individuals inside, that's when somebody shot, and he thought that they were shooting at him.
But he didn't tell you who allegedly fired the weapon, right?
No, he said he didn't know.
Didn't know. And when your units or other officers arrived at the scene, no one found Mr. Davis in possession of a firearm, right?
No.
As a matter of fact, you said a firearm was located in, I believe you said one was located in the attic. And did you also testify that a second was located somewhere else in the apartment?
Yes, sir, in the closet.
And again, you don't place my client, Mr. Davis, in the closet where the weapon is located, do you?
No, when officers came into contact with him, he did not have a weapon in his possession.
Didn't have a weapon in his possession, and we already know he doesn't live there, correct?
Correct.
All right, and he's already told you, the alleged victim, I'm not for sure who pointed this firearm at me. Is that correct?
Yeah, he doesn't know exactly who. We don't know who had the gun to his head when he walked out, but he was adamant that when he went back inside prior to having that gun put to the back of his head, that all four individuals were pointing guns at him inside of the house while he was on the ground.
Okay, and you only located 2 weapons inside the house, right?
That is correct.
And your alleged victim, you said he was in jail in Gwinnett County prior to this?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know that?
That's what he stated. He told the detective that interviewed him that.
Did
And
you check that out? Did you verify that as part of your investigation?
Yes, and like when he got released from Gwinnett, I guess they vacuum seal your stuff to like a poster board. When you get released from jail, your property that was inside of the apartment.
And so you did look up to see what he had been arrested for, correct?
Yes, I don't remember what it was off the top of my head right now.
But he was in custody and was recently released.
Yes, sir.
I believe that's all I have, Judge.
Okay, Ms. Broussard, does the state have any redirect?
No, Your Honor, the state rests.
Okay, Mr. McKeithen, if you have an argument, you can present it this time and the state will respond.
Just briefly, Judge, you've heard the testimony. I think this is obviously a case that begs the question about the credibility of the victim. He's clear my client did not have any weapons. That is the detective when they came. He doesn't live at the property. They located a weapon in the closet and in the attic. They can't seem to connect my client, Mr. Davis, to either location where it was located. And then there are certainly questions about, did anyone actually point, if it is true, a weapon at him? My client's not in possession of it. My client doesn't live at the property. And at the end of the day, Judge, I think obviously some of these matters may be matters of trial issue and credibility. I know we're here today just for probable cause, but I would submit to the court that the evidence seems borderline less than probable cause. So I will submit it on the basis of my summation of what I understand the evidence have been in this case. On the issue of possession, they got to place a weapon in his possession. Neither weapon was found in his possession. He doesn't live on the property. And certainly they got to prove that he did, in fact, at some point possess and point the weapon at the alleged victim. Seems to be some questions about that. Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McKeithen. Ms. Bruiser, the state's response.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would argue that we have met our burden for probable cause. Your Honor heard testimony today that the victim was inside of the apartment and told law enforcement that all 4 individuals were pointing a gun at him, and law enforcement actually observed a gun pointed to his head when he went outside of the apartment. Mr. Davis was inside of the apartment when law enforcement entered, and guns were found inside of that location. Judge, for probable cause, the state has met its burden, and we ask that you bind the charges over as stated in the warrant.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. McKeithen, looking at it from a judicial perspective, it looks like it's a party to a crime or so, with all defendants, not one directly or indirectly. So because it's more of a party to the crime, I do find there's enough evidence to at least have just arrested him, not to, of course, make any determinations beyond that. But under the theory of party to a crime, I do find sufficient probable cause. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. McKeithen, are you going to have you petition Superior Court for bond for your client?
Yes, I believe we're waiting on a hearing for that. Today is Tuesday. I believe it's on a calendar for tomorrow or Thursday, I believe.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, all right, well, that concludes our hearing. I've got some things to over that. Our clerk just sent an update on the other co-defendants, so you have that through email, Mr. McKeithen, okay?
Okay, thank you, Judge.
All right, and young man, your attorney will proceed to the Superior Court to try to obtain a bond for you, and then he'll follow up with you about that bond hearing.